On August 24th, 2001, Air Transat Flight 236 embarked on a routine journey from Toronto, Canada, to Lisbon, Portugal. What began as a typical transatlantic flight quickly became one of the most remarkable survival stories in aviation history. The crew and passengers had no idea that within hours they would be faced with a life-or-death situation that would test every ounce of their training and resolve. This is the story of Flight 236 and how they managed to keep flying when the impossible seemed inevitable. The flight was cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet, but something had gone terribly wrong in the aircraft's fuel system. A critical error in the fueling process during a stopover in the Azores meant that the Airbus A330 was not fully fueled, despite what the pilots believed. At around 13:20, the first signs of trouble appeared. A warning light illuminated in the cockpit, signaling a fuel imbalance. The pilots didn't immediately panic. After all, this warning could mean several things. But as the minutes passed, it became clear they were losing fuel faster than expected. As the aircraft continued its flight, it became apparent that the fuel reserves were dangerously low. By 4 p.m., Flight 236 had lost more than 35,000 pounds of fuel. The engines started to sputter, and the plane's engines began to lose power. It was at this moment that Captain Robert Pichet and First Officer Dirk de Jager realized the magnitude of the situation they were in. They had no choice but to make a decision, to attempt an emergency landing without enough fuel to reach any of the nearby airports. Captain Pichet's mind raced. The nearest airport was over 100 miles away. At this point, he had no other option but to glide the plane. The aircraft's engines were now completely offline, and the crew began a slow and painstaking descent toward the nearest available airport in the Azores. What would have been a catastrophic situation for most pilots, Captain Pichet and his crew approached with a calm resolve. They quickly calculated their glide ratio and determined that they could still make it. But the pressure was mounting. Every second counted. Their radios crackled as the flight attendants informed the passengers, who had no idea of the full extent of the emergency unfolding. The plane's descent was a delicate balancing act. With no engines to power them, they were relying solely on the lift provided by the aircraft's wings to carry them forward. Every degree of angle mattered. Captain Pichet and First Officer de Jager communicated flawlessly as they coordinated with air traffic control, giving them updates on their situation. They needed to find a way to extend the glide and conserve as much altitude as possible. As Flight 236 descended, the crew maintained control, relying on years of experience and their training to keep the aircraft steady. Meanwhile, the passengers remained unaware of the peril they were in, trusting their crew to keep them safe. Minutes seemed like hours as Flight 236 neared the island. The plane was now very low on fuel. Captain Pichet had to make a series of quick decisions. The airport runway was not ideal for an emergency landing, and there was no time to divert to another airport. He adjusted their course, lining up for a final approach. The plane was now in a precarious position, and the crew had to do everything in their power to keep it in the air. At this point, Captain Pichet was relying on pure skill, experience, and the faintest hope that they could make it to the runway in time. Against all odds, Flight 236 finally touched down on the runway of Lagos Airport. The Airbus A330's wheels made contact with the tarmac, and the passengers erupted into applause, unaware of the sheer magnitude of what had just occurred. The aircraft had glided more than 120 miles, using only the lift from its wings, and it landed safely, with no fuel left to spare. Captain Pichet and his crew had accomplished the impossible. In the end, not a single life was lost, and all 306 people on board were safe. Air Transat Flight 236's story became an instant legend in aviation history. It serves as a testament to the skill and determination of the flight crew, whose calm under pressure, combined with their extensive training, saved hundreds of lives that day. This miraculous landing reminds us of the power of human ingenuity and the unwavering commitment to survival, even when faced with what seems like certain disaster. Flight 236 proves that, in the world of aviation, sometimes